Ray, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you for sharing the wonderful story of your dad and all of that rich story of his life and how much it means. It's wonderful that you share that with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And my first message, if there's time, I have two topics, but run, Larry, run.
I was going to say, Ray, we got time. We got time.
Okay. Run, Larry, run is my first topic, but don't let them Arnold you. You saw what happened to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He went in with a fanfare, and he made a couple shots at it and then just gave up to the other side. And I know you're not a quitter, Larry, but the Republican Party in California is probably going to abandon you, much like the National Party abandoned the president. And that would be my second thing to watch out for, is that you'll get no help from Repubs nationwide or in the state. You'll have us, Larry. Mm-hmm. All of us are out here, just like the 80 million Trump supporters. We're all out here. But you'll be almost a man who's fighting on his own in Sacramento, I'm sorry to say.
Well, there'll be some allies there. There are a few, not just a few. There's some Republicans there who are as frustrated as you are and as frustrated as I am. They're just boxed in. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of squishies up there that get along and go along. You know, one of the things that's happened in this state, Ray, is that we have term limits. And I knew that when they passed term limits some decades ago, things weren't going to get any better, and they're not. And all it's done is given the staffers and the special interests a lot more power, because the politicians come in, they're looking for their next job, they have no idea what to do. They say, what should I sign? They sign it, and things have just gotten worse.
Yeah, and the president, we saw the president suffer that the first year or two, mm-hmm. that recommendations for staff were given to him, and they all were turncoats. They were all working to undermine him. So please, beware of that.
Right.
Bring in your own people if you can, Larry. Bring in your own guys.
Will do.
And have your own close group. Subject number 2, absence of fathers in the home. Larry, you couldn't hit the target more center than that. And the left and all of their policies that have caused this, they just run away from it. That's the last thing they want to hear. And Michael in San Francisco, you ran from it too. I don't think Michael in San Francisco even understood himself what his arguments were. Nonetheless, the rest of us.
Well, Ray.
But my brother and I turned, real quick, we turned into two feral young men after the death of my father. And my sister ran off and married a man who was really no good for her, pregnant before she got married, and ultimately divorced. Because of the absence of a father, Larry. It's so basic. And thank you for making that fight. That is a wonderful place to stand your ground. Thank you.
Ray, I like the way you put it. You and your brother became feral. You remember that football player for the New England Patriots, Aaron Hernandez? He ended up, I think he ended up getting convicted of murder. He had a wonderful life. Things were going well until his father died. And he went feral.
Yeah, the father is a guardrail system for your highway, and when you start to get off the side of the road, he bangs you back into the highway. Mm-hmm. And absent of those guardrails, you just run off the road and off into the ditch and wherever down the side of the hill, wherever you end up. You know, it's sad. My brother and I both ended up in the Army, and I think that straightened both of us out, gave us some purpose, and let us know that the world wasn't about us. It was about something bigger, and. So thank you again for standing that ground, Larry. It's a great place to stand, and someone needs to be there, and you're there. Thank you.
Well, God bless you, Ray. Thank you so much for the call. By the way, I'm asking people if you think I ought to run, and I've set up a personal email address. Just give me your thoughts, LarryAElder@gmail.com. LarryAElder@gmail.com. I just want your thoughts. What do you think? Some people think that my platform here is bigger. Some people think that it'll be a bigger platform if I'm governor. Some people think that because this state is going to hell in a handbasket, and that I might very well be able to do something about it. Want me to? But I'm listening. Haven't made a decision just yet, but I certainly am listening. So let me know what your thoughts are. LarryAElder@gmail.com. LarryAElder@gmail.com. And Ray, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. Ted is in Clearwater, Florida. Ted, you're on the Larry Elder Show.
Hey, Larry, love your show. I listen all the time.
Thank you.
But yeah, I was telling your screener. This little game I play when I check out of a store. I look at the price and I kind of convert it into a year in my head, and I'm like, was that a good year or a bad year? You know. And so I happened to be checking out of an Aldi's, and the price was $18.95, and just happened to be a young black man at the register. I said, $18.95. You know, I bet that was a pretty good year. And he said, well, not for my people. I'm like, wait a minute. We're 30 years after the Civil War. The slaves are freed. It was called the Gilded Age. We weren't at war with anybody. Income tax hadn't been invented yet. We just got the telephone. We're a few years away from having airplanes. I mean, what's the problem? And he's like, well, it just wasn't good for my people. We still were slaves. I'm like, no. This is 35 years later. And he's like, I said, okay, wait a minute. I tried to look at it. Things had magically changed in the South overnight, but certainly by 1870, any freed black had certainly made his way north or west and gone to places where slavery had never existed. You know, the new territories or New England. I mean, I grew up in New England. And I said, he could have certainly made it out of the deep South, in fact, 5 years later. And he said, well, those places weren't any better. And I'm like, wow. Where do you go from here when you're like in your early 20s and you're that jaded about something that happened 150 years before you were born? But
Ted, thank you very much for the call. Wow. Tom Sowell said one time somebody said, well, there's still a gap. And he said, well, white people haven't stood still. They kept going too. I'm Larry Elder.